Hello, everybody, and good morning, and welcome to a very special episode of the Spotlight series here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Many of you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, and today is a very special episode here on the channel. Now, I am joined by an amazing duo here. Many of you will remember as a guest who was in their very first author interview way back in the day in the podcast's history. And many of you know he was the author of an incredible trilogy of angels, pixies, demons, all of that goodness. And today he is back with his brother to talk about an incredible new project they're working on together. And I am so excited to have them back here on the show. So without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to our guests today, brothers Francisco and Guillermo. Francisco, Guillermo, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to
Thanks
be
for
here.
having us.
Awesome. Guys, I am so excited to have you guys here on the show. When I told friends and family that I was having you guys on the show, one of my relatives said, "You're really going to have one of these days a Puerto Rican happy hour for all of the guests that you've done." And you know what? That may be a thing I'll have to do in the future. Get all the Puerto Rican creators that I've had on the show for a very special episode. I have to call it something, but yeah. But in all seriousness, I'm so excited to have you guys here. It's been a long time coming, and I'm so excited to learn a little bit about this upcoming project of yours.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Nice. So, for those who are just meeting you, Guillermo, and for those reintroducing themselves to you, Francisco, can you guys give a little overview about your backgrounds again and just what led to the creation of this incredible project of yours?
I guess I'll start. Yeah, I have been on the show. I was featured once before for the trilogy you mentioned, my Wings saga, which I self-published a few years back. The final book in that trilogy, I believe, was 2-3 years ago. Yeah, I'm a active duty full-time officer in the United States Coast Guard. Took some time to write when COVID happened during the shutdown. Wanted to pursue that passion of mine. After I wrote that trilogy, I took a little break, and my brother, who we're interviewing too, reached out to me, said that if I had ideas for a future book, he wanted to help out and be in that. So it kind of motivated me to get some of the ideas that I already had in my mind for this dark fantasy out there. And yeah, started writing on it. And here we are. I'll pass it over to my brother.
All right. Well, I'm Guillermo. So back before my brother was in the Coast Guard, I was in the Coast Guard. Spent 5 years in, and he basically came in when I got out. I went back to school for electrical engineering. And after getting a new degree in that, because originally I had a degree in biology, after I got my degree in electrical engineering, I now work in the aerospace industry. But I've always been a big fan of fantasy type genre and thinking about different systems and whatnot. But I kind of approach it almost like an engineer. Like what are the rules to this world? How do we make everything like very cohesive, but at the same time very fantastical? And it's just like Frank said. I was like, hey, if you're doing something new, I want in. I'm gonna help out and support and contribute.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. And I had a chance to actually look at the story on Amazon just to get myself, prepped and ready for this very special spotlight. And honestly, I love the idea. I love what you guys have. The cover art is amazing for the cover. It really sends a message. And again, I could talk about it all throughout like an hour episode, but I don't want to reveal too much. Just give like a little teasers. So I guess let's just dive right into the first question of this very incredible episode. So let's talk about inspiration really quick. What inspired you guys to blend elements of Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian history into the narrative of the Handless Swordsman? Because that's a very interesting combination. There's a lot of shared history between those three, and I'm very curious of how you were guys able to make it work.
I think what it came down to in this setting, I originally probably had it in mind for like a kind of like an English background, English setting. And when it comes to creating stuff in the lore and the history, um, I had inspiration actually from a game called Blasphemous, because like it was a small group of indie gamers who created a game like in a Spanish setting, kind of breaking away from that typical mold when it comes to fairy tales. I was like, why don't we do that here? Like we can use that as the backdrop for this story, kind of making it a little bit unique. And the fact that my brother and I are both descendants from like Spanish immigrants, it kind of like hit home a little bit more. So I kind of want to try that angle, try something new, a little bit different, but something that's also for us in a sense.
Yeah. Also, yeah, I've been actually learning Italian
Yeah.
on the side. We took a trip to Italy not too long ago, so there was a lot of like just the looking at the world, the old style buildings and whatnot, and just like the politics of church and whatnot, like those old Vatican politics and stuff like that, and thinking about how would that play out in a fantasy setting that's kind of around the romance language style world instead of like the Anglo world.
Right, absolutely. And this kind of boils down to something that I find very fascinating is when we write fantasy, we always tend to place it in a lot of like the medieval settings or some of my friends have said like in Western European history and sometimes based in England. That's usually kind of like the cornerstone of all fantasy stories. But fantasy as a genre can go into anywhere. It could draw from many other cultures, histories, inspirations, and it doesn't get a lot of, recognition or doesn't get talked about as much. So the fact that you guys are doing something very different for the fantasy genre and exploring other cultures, drawing other real world inspirations to create this original setting with these characters is fascinating. And I cannot wait for readers to see that. And speaking of characters, let's talk a little bit about probably one of the main characters. Can you guys tell us as much as you can or as little about Monero's journey and what readers can expect about his character development throughout the story? Again, this may border into spoilers, so give as much or as little.
I guess some framing for it. Probably your typical or like a typical kind of soldier who's fought in like some crusade style wars. He's coming back home after that and trying to settle and trying to disassociate himself from that. So he finds love, and that kind of like helps him further disassociate himself from his past as this brutal soldier. And when it came to creating him, I had this idea at the time, kind of inspired from a real world. He was a special forces operator called Nick Lavery, where he actually lost a leg in combat. He came back and he had a prosthetic and he kind of built himself back up physically to rejoin his special forces unit and actually go back into combat with a prosthetic leg. So there was that, and there was like a sense of identity of what eventually happened, right? The name of the story is called The Handless Swordsman for a reason. And on the summary of the book, it kind of talks about like how, yes, he's going to lose his hands at some point, and for a swordsman to lose your hands, it's like you're losing your identity. And like, how do you bounce back from that? So I don't know how much we want to dabble before like getting into like spoilers and things of that nature. But that was kind of like the background I had for him, is like, someone who is a soldier for years, uses his hands for combat, and then loses his hands, and through just events in the world that circumstances that kind of thrust him back into that position. Like, how does he become that again in order to succeed in his quest? And funnily enough, actually, the name Monero comes from G gave me that idea. So maybe I can let him talk to that and how he got the name Monero for him.
Well, I mean, there's not too much to it. Really, it's an Italian word. and it's based on his history in combat, where the Italian word, I think it roughly it's like a werewolf. It's like he's a savage man.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of the name they gave him for his deeds early on, but before the big events.
Yeah, there's definitely, and readers will hopefully catch on to that, is just how heavy the cultural influences are when it comes to like, hey, like certain characters, you know, they have like kind of like this Italian background, certain characters, Portuguese and others like Spanish. And it like ties in a lot of these like real world culture influences, but into this, you know, made up land. Espada is what we call it.
Ooh, I like it.
That?
Wouldn't be an episode without an animal being involved, so that's kind of on point. All right, nice. So now let's talk about one thing which I am very intrigued by, and that is the role of the spirit. Now, the invisible spirit plays a crucial role, as readers will find out in Minoru's story. And just like before, what can readers expect from this mysterious being, and how does the spirit like influence his path?
Yeah, so there is a lot of background with these spirits and how they influence the world, and you'll kind of read, and we discussed a little bit about how there's a ruling church similar to the Catholic Church and how it rules the land. But people don't really have an understanding of what gods and gods are, or, you know, gods and spirits. They're kind of synonymous.
There's the truth, and there's what people believe the truth to be.
Exactly.
Right.
And so Monero, he's not really like this big believer in, you know, the standing religion of the country, because there's other things and other characters who influence like his beliefs, who, you know, just by their being are very powerful in themselves, but they are human at the end of the day. So he kind of, again, through just circumstances, kind of like gets awakened and introduced to the spirit through the princess that like he falls in love with, who's, you know, she's just a person who has very strong magical abilities. And there's sort of this doorway that opens and connects him with what we call like the higher realm, which is like where these spirits manifest. And this one kind of like finds him and latches onto him. And yeah, so after a series of, you know, events unfold, after he loses his hands, the spirit is kind of there to like help pick him up and guide him, especially like when he goes to sleep, because that's how she talks to him, is in his dreams. And yeah, she kind of like props him up in a way. And I don't want to spoil too much, because she's kind of like leading him on his path of like ultimate revenge, because maybe she has some goals there too. But she kind of like gives him these abilities of like, hey, like even though he doesn't have his hands, she's going to help him, especially like at night, to become this warrior who can, you know, accomplish his goals here for vengeance.
Nice. Guillermo, anything to further add to that?
Just that the dynamic between Monero and the spirit are almost like, there's almost like a parallel mirror happening on the side as well, because of some other side characters. You'll notice that there's it's almost like a reflection of what's happening, but from a different perspective. I can get into it afterwards, but basically there's a whole side series of events that are happening, because the big cataclysmic event that affected Monero didn't just affect him, it affected the world. So it's looking at how things are playing out from different perspectives as well.
Awesome. All right. Now, before I get into the next question, there was actually a fan question one of my viewers actually sent to me prior to this interview, and they wanted to ask you guys this question because they're very interested to learn more about two creatives working together on a project, because there's a lot of things that go into, balancing out the two ideas that you guys have, or various ideas you guys have for the story of how characters are supposed to go, the outline and everything. So Francisco and Guillermo, when you guys were actually sitting down and examining the overall idea of the story, how did you guys sort of work it out and come to a balance of, this is how the story is supposed to go, in the sense of both of your guys' inspirations and your thoughts are being inputted into the story, so that way it's not one or the other? Because I've had another group on the show, another duo, my good friends Matt and Lauren, who have spoke a lot about this topic on, two authors co-writing a book, and a lot of things go into it. So I was wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about how you found that balance for you both.
Yeah, I think it was what helped is I don't know, I guess to put it in a sense, we kind of staying in our own lanes. I had this idea for the narrative in itself, even though I hadn't formally codified what the lore and the background and the setting was going to be. And that's where G jumped in and helped me out a lot, was in that aspect. And he made it pretty clear at first. It's he wants to help with the rules, the lore, the magic systems and things of that nature.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, oh, that's great, because, I already have an idea for this character in this story, but he can add on to that, and I can just kind of whatever rules he creates, I can play around with that and kind of throw it in there.
Yeah, we had a very clear understanding of what our roles were.
Yeah.
My brother, he owned the main narrative. It was him. The main story, the main characters, they're his. But I had my own characters that they were mine. I came up with the rules of how the magic works, some of the mythology, how stuff works. Even if you don't hear about it in the story, we knew what the truth was of how the world was created and everything, and why things work the way they do, even if it is, you only get snippets of it, whether directly or indirectly. So every once in a while, when his characters would intersect with mine, we still maintained ownership of, this is how my character would react, this is how my character would do this. But since he owned the main narrative, anything that had to do with the main story, it was up to him. My job, while I did the first pass of editing, where I read his work and I made sure, okay, this is how this works. So I would give suggestions here and there, and he read my work, and he would add his own input and whatnot, to make sure that we weren't contradicting each other. But it's like he said, we very specifically had our own roles, our own lane, and we didn't try to. I wasn't going to be like, hey, this story should end like this. It's no. This is your story. This is your main narrative. Your main narrative ends however you want it, and I have my side stories end the way I want them. But I'm going to make sure that my side stories end in a way that doesn't conflict with the main narrative.
Okay.
I think one of just because it's one of my favorite parts in this is there's a certain point where our characters do meet in the story, and the way we attack that, which was I think was pretty awesome, is I kind of stepped into the role of Monero, and he stepped into the role of his character, and we just had a conversation this is how Monero would act and say, and his character did the same thing, so reciprocally. So we wrote it just like that, like a conversation of he got into the role of his character and I got into the role of mine, and I think it led to a pretty awesome part when they actually do meet and converse.
We were doing Google Documents, so we could both type at the same time, so it was almost like a chat.
Yeah.
Nice. Very, very nice. Yeah, I think it is important to talk about this aspect of the writing journey, especially when you are co-authoring a book with someone, to have that balance, to already have those discussions from the beginning, to plan out, I'm going to be doing this, you're going to be focusing on this, and that it blends beautifully, which I think from what you guys have said, it works for this book, and I think it's really going to highlight both your strengths as creatives, which I cannot wait for viewers to see and myself see as well. Now, another thing I was very, very intrigued by when reading like the uh, backdrop of this book was sort of like the themes of loss and redemption. Now, how do the themes of loss and revenge shape the overall narrative of The Handless Swordsman? What message do you hope readers will take away from Minero's quest as they follow him throughout this book?
Yeah, so that's a lot more subtle and maybe cynical in my point of view, because when you read something like the Lord of the Rings, Tolkien was like outspoken, very Catholic and Christian, and he had those elements integrated in there. When I wrote this one specifically, unlike the trilogy before, it's very, I guess, selfish and egotistical, because a lot of characters are what drive the story and propel it. It's yes, it is fantasy. Yes, there are like gods and spirits, but at the end of the day, it's like very human driven, and like what are humans kind of like willing to do in order to get their own in this world. So in that sense, like I kind of hope like the readers kind of see that a little bit, where it's not like my other stories where they're very I guess happy ending kind of stories. In this one, you're going to read like what people are trying to do in order to get more power or do whatever. If they have to kind of like play the system or take advantage of certain things, they certainly do. So I kind of like hope that they pick up that you're not really sure where this is going to take you and to what depths people are willing to go in order to achieve their goals, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sometimes it's not about identifying with the character as much as learning from their mistakes.
Yep.
Nice. Well said. Well said. Now, let's go back to the setting of this story, which I'm very keen to learn a little bit more. Now, what makes the setting in The Handless Swordsman so unique? And how does the setting enhance the story's dark fairy tale atmosphere?
Yeah, so definitely put it out there. This story is pretty dark. It's pretty graphic. I'll give that warning to readers to be ready. If anyone's kind of like read Berserk and things of that nature, where
yes,
yeah, you can expect that there's going to be some pretty horrific things going on. So in my mind, this was kind of like a blend of like horror, fantasy, cosmic horror, things of that nature, but also while trying to like stay true to a lot of like these Italian, Portuguese, and Spanish cultural aspects, like thrown in there, like how our descendants probably would react in a world like this. So there's a lot of like real world imagery, culturalism, and things of that nature that you can expect in here. But also, this is kind of like a dark story that is kind of going to like hit you with a sledgehammer over the head with some of the twists and turns that it takes.
Yeah, I feel that it's not that we were like purposely trying to avoid tropes.
Yeah.
But I think we end up naturally avoiding tropes just because we're trying to think about it, not trying to be like too grounded, but it's like, how would an institution or how would people realistically react to certain situations? And given the powers that people can have, given the existence of magic, and given these strong religious convictions that some people might have.
Absolutely. So it seems to me that what readers can expect is that there are going to be a lot more. It's going to be a lot more thematic. There's going to be much more themes that readers are going to pick up, as opposed to tropes in fiction. Not to say that tropes don't always exist in fiction. Tropes do find a way to get themselves into stories in terms of types of characters, relationships, and so forth. But from what I'm getting a sense of, while tropes may find a way into this book, they're not the main focus. It's going to be more of thematic. There's going to be a lot of themes that are going to be sprinkled throughout. There's going to be some very subtle themes. There's going to be some overarching themes that are going to be very pinnacle to the story.
It's
Now,
very critical, very character driven.
Yeah.
So it's like, why are things happening? It's because of decisions people are making.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Now, you talked a little bit about the princess and Monero's relationship briefly, and can you guys talk a little bit more about not only that relationship, but how does their relationship affect other characters in the book?
Yeah. So mainly it is going to affect Monero the most, right? Like he's this war torn, kind of like child. Um, and that was his world, his worldview, when suddenly the shift for him is like, hey, now we're at peace. The king, who's kind of like used you as this monster in the battlefield, just kind of needs you to settle down and take a step back into this role of like kind of protecting his daughter, just being there for her and maybe training her up, because just because we're in peace, that doesn't mean that we're any less vulnerable. And that kind of like, as that progresses, it kind of like opens him up a little bit, his vulnerable side, to see if like maybe he can take a step back from like the perceptions that others have about him of being like this monster, but also how does he view himself, and if that's actually something that, you know, he can actually change or not, right? And then as things unfold, as kind of like enemies start coming into the picture, can he be this new guy that the princess and the kingdom expects of him, or does he have to like resort to going back to who he used to be? So yeah, and in the beginning, especially the first part, it's a lot of getting readers introduced into this new world as we're coming into it. Just like Monero is getting introduced to this new world, he doesn't know what peace and everything is and what his role is necessarily into this. But as time goes through and you know his relationship with the princess develops, he starts changing his worldview a little bit, and it's kind of like taking a step back from, you know, the world isn't this horrible place that I'm used to because I grew up into this, you know, wartime era when this king was trying to unify the lands, and here I am now, kind of expected to just stop all that and become something new. It is very focused from his point of view. So it's kind of like hard to judge how other characters around are affected, but you do see it. Like you start seeing it in the king himself, when the king kind of starts taking a step back from Monero and from his past too, and how that kind of like builds up and develops when, you know, there's this new threat coming in, and maybe they were too relaxed to really like, you know, take this head on. Yeah, I think that's good without getting into too many spoilers.
Yeah, you have to consider that the kind of relationship they have isn't exactly something that's going to be public.
Yeah.
So realistically, so because of the way Monero grew up and all the things he's experienced, like to him, this is his new center. This is his whole world, but nobody else knows about that. But it's gonna motivate his decisions. So people are gonna be affected indirectly by his motivations.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. All righty. So it definitely seems to me that there is going to be a lot of tension and intrigue that the readers are going to pick up in this story. And what also you guys talked about earlier in the beginning is the symbolism of the hand. Francisco, as you said, you know, a swordsman, you know, prize in themselves as warriors are their hands. What happens when a warrior loses that? It kind of like takes away their identity. So ultimately, how did you guys work that into the narrative story to add, you know, that element of intrigue and tension, as well as what does the hand ultimately represent in terms of his identity and agency as a character in this book?
Yeah, I think kind of goes without saying, when he loses his hands, it's pretty much rock bottom for him. Where do you go from there? What do you do? How do you save your kingdom? when you're supposed to be this warrior of renown and now you don't have your hands. Trying to frame it in a way, I guess, so it's not too spoilery.
Mm-hmm.
But again, just like this real life case, right, where you have this soldier who lost his leg in Afghanistan, and he said, "I'm going to go back out there," and you can only imagine what other people must have thought. Like, no, you're crazy. Like, you're not going back out there. Like, how's that even feasible? But when you're like so driven, when you're so focused on one goal, you find that there's ways to get there. So yeah, it is like, obviously, like it will reflect in him hitting rock bottom, but you'll find avenues, ways around that to make it work. And you'll see it with this spirit that's kind of like latched onto him, and how she'll provide him the means of like, hey, you want this real bad at night, I can help you out with that. And you can go out and, kind of two birds, one stone. You'll be doing your thing. And by you doing your thing, it'll also help me out. So I know I kind of kept a little bit vague there, but I'll pass it over to G if he wants to add something there.
No, you said it well. You said it well.
Yeah.
Nice. Very, very nice. Now, I did have one other thing too. So there's definitely a lot of dark ancestral tones in this story from what you have been telling me. And we know that there's a lot of real world cultural influences that you have intertwined with, the lore, with building this world and everything like that. And from what you also said, there are going to be a lot of supporting characters that are going to have their own stories that are not going to contradict the main narrative, which I think is very, very enticing and incredible. And there's a lot of morality choices as well that I assume Monero is going to experience and readers are going to notice in the character as well. So I'm very intrigued by this question. So, Guillermo, as the lore master of this story, working with your brother, do you guys see a potential for his story to continue beyond this installment based upon the world building aspects you guys have laid down in this book?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I feel that even though itself works as a self-contained story, we laid out a lot of foundations for that we can build a continuation on, both with his characters and my characters.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
I don't want to get too into it, but a lot of stuff happens, and there's a lot of ramifications and a lot of shifting of power here and there.
Yeah.
All right. I like it. And as we now wrap up this incredible spotlight interview here on the show, gentlemen, ultimately, what do you hope resonates most with readers as they delve into Monero's tale? And finally, is there anything else you would like to share about the Handless Swordsman that might surprise or intrigue readers when they order it?
Honestly, I just want the readers to read it and just have fun with it. Just go along with the ride. It is a pretty big book, and when I write things, I like there to be some sort of finality so that readers feel accomplished, that it has like a start point and an end point. I love there to be little things that they can pick up throughout the story of like, ooh, that's interesting. There's that. It is definitely not black and white. It is not, this heroic tales of like champions where it's like a clearly designated good versus evil. It is big. It is like I was telling you before the interview, right? Like this story alone is pretty much my last 3 books put together lengthwise. But I like that because normally people, when they get into some fantasies, I want there to kind of be that journey for them, where by the time they get to the end, not necessarily they're exhausted, but they feel like that feeling like of accomplishment, like, yeah, like I was there with my character and I made it through from start to finish through this, grand epic. So yeah, I think my key takeaway is I want readers to have fun with it. Know that it is a dark fantasy. It is a twist on fairy tales. That's how I went into it. Like, I want people who are just enjoyers of fairy tales and fantasies to kind of go in there to get this like different lens, a more darker lens. And yeah, just go with it. Go through the journey with Manero and all these other fabulous characters that he meets, and not be quick to judge, and kind of find surprise in the surprises that are there. And yeah, just go with it and see if they can make it all the way up to the end.
Nice.
Yeah.
Guillermo, anything further to add to that?
Yeah. Like we really tried to make a world that actually felt like a world.
Yeah.
And you'll see that, like, with the side stories that I put in there. You're looking at like how the events that are happening in the main story are rippling and affecting normal people that didn't necessarily have that power to fight back the way that others did, and what happened to them, and what they did to survive. And it'd be very interesting. What I would really like is we should definitely have a follow-up after you've had a chance to read it, and we can have the spoiler warning and be like, let's talk about what happened.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Absolutely, gentlemen. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we end this incredible spotlight interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I want to give a huge thank you to Francisco and Guillermo for coming on the show and telling us all about the Handless Swordsman. Gentlemen, it's a blast having you on the show. Where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out and connect? And if the book is available for pre-order, where can they get it? Or if it's already out and ready to buy, where can people buy it?
Yep. So my Instagram is FR Colom-Braná, altogether, FRCOLOMBRANA. And the book will be out for sale May 29th, but they can pre-order the Kindle version today if they want. Just go to Amazon. It's on there. And we will have paperback versions, hardcover versions, Kindle, and hopefully, we're still working on it, we'll have an audiobook version as well. I do have, like, this was just like my version that I was like kind of like cutting through. This obviously is very close to what the final cut's going to be. And like I said, it's pretty big. This is a hardcover. It's like the size of my head there, but it's full of content. Excited for people to kind of just delve in, give this new world a try. And if they're like lore masters and historians, there's plenty of fun to be had there. In addition, if they want to like nitpick stuff. So yeah, that's what I'll say for me.
Yeah. No, I don't really have any like author social media set up yet, but like I'm pretty sure my brother would forward any message.
Yeah, they could reach out to me. It's completely fine.
All righty. Well, I will link all that down below in the description of this video. And if you'd like to see Francisco and Guillermo back on the show for a full author interview to talk all about the spoilers of the Handless Swordsman, you know what you have to do. You have to like this video, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel. And until next time, a huge thank you to Francisco and Guillermo for coming on the show, wishing them the very best, and I look forward to having them back on the show to talk more about their incredible project together. And until then, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wish you all a wonderful morning or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Take care. Happy Sunday. We'll see you all next time.